How much longer do you think it will take?
He's almost got it. Just give him a second.
You know, there's a very specific, heartbreaking sound a diesel engine makes right before it dies. It's not a bang, it's a wheeze. Like a heavy smoker trying to catch his breath after running up a flight of stairs, and then just a silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that feels louder than any siren. I heard that sound on a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday in November where the rain in Ohio isn't really rain. It's just liquid ice that finds the gap in your collar and slides right down your spine. And I was standing in the bay of Kowalski's auto and body, elbow deep in the transmission of a pristine 1968 Shelby Mustang that belonged to the mayor. A car that was worth more than my house and my truck combined. My boss, Stan Kowalski, was pacing behind me, checking his watch every 30 seconds, tapping his clipboard with that nervous, irritating rhythm he did whenever a VIP client was waiting, reminding me that the mayor needed this car for a parade at noon, and if I didn't get that linkage fixed, I might as well start looking for a cardboard box to live in. Stan was the kind of guy who charged customers for the shop rags we used to wipe the grease off their dipsticks. A man who saw the world purely in terms of profit margins and billable hours. And he had been riding me all week because my son, Leo, had needed braces, and I'd asked for an advance on my paycheck, which Stan had laughed at like I'd told him a joke. So there I was, sweating despite the cold, trying to thread a bolt into a space smaller than my thumb, when the siren started wailing from down the road, getting louder, closer, until it cut off abruptly right in front of our shop, followed by that wheezing death rattle of an engine giving up the ghost. I looked up through the open bay door, wiping grease on my forehead, and saw an ambulance lights still flashing red and white, painting the wet asphalt in a panic-inducing strobe effect. Stalled dead center in the middle of Route 9, blocking traffic, steam hissing out from under the hood like an angry tea kettle. Ignore it, Caleb, Stan barked, not even looking up from his invoice. You got 45 minutes to finish that Mustang or the mayor pulls his city fleet contract. And if he pulls the fleet, you're the first one I'm cutting loose. And I knew he meant it because Stan didn't make idle threats. He made business decisions. And to him, people were just overhead costs that could be trimmed. But then I saw the driver, a kid, maybe 22, jumping out of the rig, slamming his hands on the hood, screaming into his radio. And the back doors flew open and a paramedic jumped out, slipping on the wet pavement, looking around with wide, terrified eyes, and I could see through the open doors they were doing chest compressions on someone. You don't spend 12 years as a mechanic in the Marine Corps, fixing Humvees in the dust while rounds are popping off in the distance, without learning to read the energy of a situation. And the energy out there wasn't just breakdown, it was life or death, raw and immediate. Stan, they got a code going on out there, I said, putting my wrench down. I'm gonna go see if I can jump it or bypass the starter. But Stan stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the door, his face turning that shade of purple that meant he was losing control. You take one step out that door, Miller, and you're done, he hissed, pointing a finger right in my chest. I'm not running a charity. That ambulance is county property. Let the county send a tow truck. Let them send a backup. But you are on my clock. And my clock says you finished the mayor's car. I looked at Stan, really looked at him. At the grease stains on his shirt that were fake because he hadn't touched a tool in 10 years. And then I looked out at the rain, where the young driver was weeping, actually weeping, kicking the tire of the ambulance because he knew, just like I knew, that a backup rig was 20 minutes out in this weather, and whoever was in the back didn't have 20 minutes. I thought about Leo, my 16-year-old boy who was sitting in school right now wearing sneakers that were falling apart because I couldn't afford new ones yet. I thought about the rent that was due in 3 days, and I knew that walking out that door was financial suicide. But then the paramedic in the back looked up, locked eyes with me through the pouring rain, and mouthed the word please, and something inside me, maybe the Marine, maybe just the father, just snapped the leash. I'll finish the Mustang by noon. Stan, I said, my voice deeply calm in a way that scared me. But I'm not letting someone die in front of the shop. And I grabbed my mobile diagnostic bag and shoved past him. hitting the cold rain like a shock to the system. "You're fired." Stan screamed behind me, his voice cracking. "Don't you come back in here. You hear me, Miller? You're finished in this town." But the sound of his voice was drowned out by the rain and the panic. I reached the ambulance, and the driver grabbed my arm, shaking. "It just died, man. Electrical, everything just went black. We got a cardiac arrest in the back. She's fading. We need power for the defibrillator and the suction. The backup battery is dead." And I didn't waste time introducing myself. I just popped the hood. It was a chaotic mess of wires, but engines are engines. They speak a language of logic even when they're broken. And I saw it immediately. The main alternator belt had snapped and whipped around, severing the ground wire to the main fuse block, killing the circuit instantly. It was a catastrophic failure, the kind of thing that takes a shop 2 hours to fix properly. But I didn't have 2 hours, I had seconds. So I pulled out my Leatherman and a length of heavy-gauge copper wire I kept in my pocket for jumper jobs. "Get back in the cab," I yelled over the thunder. "When I tell you to crank it, you crank it and you don't stop until it catches." And I leaned into the engine bay, the rain soaking my back, my hands moving with that muscle memory that takes over when your brain is too scared to think. I stripped the wire with my teeth, bypassed the fuse block entirely, and hardwired the ignition circuit directly to the battery terminal. It was dangerous. It was reckless. It was the kind of field fix that would void every warranty in existence. But it would complete the circuit, turn it over. I screamed, and the starter whined. Once, twice, a horrible grinding sound. And then boom, the diesel roared to life, black smoke puffing out the exhaust, the lights flickering back on, the siren chirping. The paramedic in the back gave me a thumbs up, his face pale as a sheet, and shouted, "Go, go, go." And the driver didn't hesitate. He slammed it into gear and peeled out, spraying gravel and muddy water all over my legs, disappearing down the road toward Mercy General. I stood there for a second, soaking wet, shivering, holding a pair of wire strippers, feeling that adrenaline crash. And then I turned around to see Stan standing in the bay door, his arms crossed, locking the glass door of the office. He didn't even look angry anymore. He looked smug. He looked like a man who enjoyed pulling the trigger. "I told you," he mouthed through the glass. And then he pointed to my locker. "Get your trash and get off my property." The walk of shame through the garage was brutal. The other mechanics, guys I'd worked with for 5 years, wouldn't meet my eyes. They were looking at their boots, terrified that if they stood up for me, they'd be next, and I couldn't blame them. The economy in Iron Creek was dead, and a job was a lifeline. I packed my tools, my snap-ons, my torque wrench, the photo of my late wife Sarah that was taped inside the lid of my toolbox, and I walked out to my beat-up F-150, hearing the heavy metal roll-down door slam shut behind me, sealing my fate. I sat in my truck for a long time, just gripping the steering wheel, the water dripping off my nose onto my lap, thinking about how I was going to tell Leo. How do you tell your kid that being a hero means we might not eat well next week? How do you explain that doing the right thing felt exactly like failure? I drove home in a daze, the windshield wipers slapping back and forth like a metronome counting down the time, until my savings account hit zero. That night was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy. Leo was in his room studying for a chemistry test, and I was at the kitchen table staring at the classified ads in the newspaper, circling jobs that I was overqualified for, and that paid half of what I was making at Stan's. I didn't tell Leo, yet I couldn't bear to see the worry in his eyes, so I just made us spaghetti and acted like everything was normal, but I couldn't sleep. I just laid there staring at the water stain on the ceiling, wondering if I'd made a mistake, wondering if maybe Stan was right and looking out for number one was the only way to survive in this world. The next morning, around 10 a.m., I was in the driveway changing the oil on my own truck, just to keep my hands busy, when a black sedan pulled up. Not a cop car, but a luxury sedan, sleek, German engineering, completely out of place in our neighborhood of cracked driveways and chain-link fences. A woman got out, sharp suit, hair pulled back tight, holding a tablet, and she checked the house number before walking straight up the driveway. her heels clicking on the concrete, ignoring the oil stain near her feet. "Caleb Miller?" she asked, not checking her tablet, just looking me dead in the eye. "Depends on who's asking," I said, wiping my hands on a rag, instinctively defensive, thinking maybe Stan was suing me for something, or maybe the bank was. "Here already. My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm the executive assistant to Elena Sterling," she said. And the name didn't ring a bell instantly, but the tone of her voice suggested it should have. "Miss Sterling would like to speak with you immediately." "I don't know any Elena Sterling," I said. "And unless she needs an oil change, I'm not really open for business right now." "She was the patient in the ambulance yesterday," Sarah said, her voice cutting through my sarcasm like a knife. "The one you fixed. She's at Mercy General, and she is insistent on meeting the mechanic who, as she puts it, resurrected the dead so she could keep living." My stomach did a flip the patient. I hadn't even thought about who was in the back. I was just thinking about the engine. Is she okay?" "She is alive," Sarah said, "which is more than the doctors expected. She's awake, she's stabilizing, and she wants to see you." Now, I wanted to say no. I wanted to stay in my safe little bubble of misery, but curiosity, or maybe just the command in this woman's voice, made me nod. I went inside, washed the grease off my arms, put on my only clean button-down shirt, the one I wore to church on Easter, and got into the back of that black sedan, the ride to. The hospital was silent, but when we got there, we didn't go to the regular rooms. We went to the top floor, the VIP wing that smelled like lavender and money. We walked past security guards who nodded at Sarah, and into a suite that was bigger than my living room, filled with flowers, where a woman was sitting up in bed, hooked up to monitors, but typing furiously on a laptop. Elena Sterling was maybe 50, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that were terrifyingly intelligent. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a general recovering from a battle. She stopped typing when I walked in, closed the laptop, and studied me for a long, uncomfortable minute, looking at my calloused hands, my cheap boots, my nervous posture. "So," she said, her voice raspy but strong, "this is the man who disobeyed a direct order to save my life. I didn't know it was you, ma'am," I said, twisting my cap in my hands. "I just knew the engine died. My doctors tell me I had a 90% blockage in the widowmaker artery," she continued, ignoring my comment. "If that ambulance had sat there for another 10 minutes waiting for a tow, I would be dead. My company, Sterling Dynamics, which employs 4,000 people and is currently on the verge of releasing a battery technology that will change the grid, would have plummeted into chaos. My stock would have tanked. My employees would have panicked." She leaned forward, wincing slightly. "You didn't just fix an engine, Mr. Miller. You saved a legacy. But I hear there was a cost. My assistant tells me you were terminated for your trouble." "Word travels fast," I muttered, feeling the humiliation rising up again. "I did a background check on you while I was eating breakfast," she said, tapping the folder on her tray table. "Honorable discharge, Marine Corps, motor T 12 years at Kowalski's, no criminal record. Single father. Mortgage is 2 months behind. Credit score is recovering." I felt my face get hot. "With all due respect, ma'am, my credit score isn't really your business." "Everything is my business," she snapped, not unkindly, just matter-of-factly. "Especially when I'm about to make an investment. You see, Caleb, I don't hire people because they are nice. I hire people because they are effective. I hire people who can look at a catastrophic failure, identify the root cause, and implement a solution in seconds while the world is falling apart around them. That is not a mechanic's skill. That is a leader's skill." I stood there, stunned. I don't understand. "I need a director of quality control for my Midwest assembly plant," she said, dropping the bomb like she was. I stood there in that sterile hospital room, holding the paper that could change my life, looking at this woman who was negotiating a business deal from her deathbed. And I realized she was right. This wasn't charity. This was a transaction. But it was the first time in my life that the currency being traded was my integrity, not just my labor. I took the pen, my hand shaking just a little, and I signed it, not for me, but for Leo, for the braces, for the look on his face when I'd Tell him he didn't have to worry about the grocery bill anymore. Good, Elena said, snatching the paper back the moment the ink was dry. You start Monday. Wear a suit, and Caleb, get a better haircut. The next 6 months were a blur, a whirlwind of learning corporate speak, wearing ties that felt like nooses, until I got used to them, and walking the floor of a factory that was size of a small city. The engineers looked down on me at first, the grease monkey the CEO brought in, until the day the main hydraulic press for the chassis line jammed and the Ivy League boys were staring at the schematics, scratching their heads. I took off my jacket, rolled up my sleeves, climbed into the pit, and realized a 10-cent seal had blown. Bypassing the safety sensor, I fixed it with a washer and a pair of pliers in 5 minutes, saving them $1 million in downtime. And after that, nobody looked down on me again. But the real kicker, the moment that felt like a movie, happened about 8 months in. Elena had recovered fully and was back on the warpath, and she decided we needed to upgrade our fleet of executive transport vehicles. We needed 20 high-end trucks for the site managers, usually. This contract went to the big dealership in the city, but Elena, with that wicked glint in her eye, told me to handle the procurement, and she specifically told me to shop local. I drove my new company car, a sleek, black SUV, down Route 9, past the old rusted signs, past the potholes, until I pulled into the lot of Kowalski's Auto and Body. The place looked exactly the same, maybe a little shabbier, the sign missing a few light bulbs, and I saw Stan standing in the bay door, yelling at some new kid who looked terrified, holding a wrench like he didn't know which end to use. I parked, right in front, not in a spot, just in the middle of the lot, and got out, adjusting my suit jacket. Stan squinted at me, wiping his hands on a dirty rag, and then his eyes went wide as he recognized me. He recognized the guy he fired, but he didn't recognize the man standing in front of him. Miller? He asked, walking over, looking at the car, looking at the suit. What, did you rob a bank? No, Stan, I said, leaning against the hood of the car, enjoying the cool metal under my hand. I got a new job. I'm the director of operations for Sterling Dynamics now. Stan's jaw literally dropped, like in a cartoon. Sterling, the factory, you, me, I said. And we're looking to award a service contract for our new fleet. About $50,000 a year in maintenance work. Routine stuff, easy money. Stan's eyes lit up, the greed instantly overriding the shock. He straightened his shirt, put on that fake, oily smile I hated so much. Well, hey, Caleb, I mean, Mr. Miller. That's great, you know. No hard feelings about before, right? It was just business. Heat of the moment. We'd love to handle that contract. We do good work. You know we do. I looked at him, looked at the garage where I had broken my back for 12 years, looked at the spot where the ambulance had died, and I thought about revenge. It would be so easy to dangle it in front of him and then crush him, but then I remembered what Elena had said about value. I know you do good work, Stan, I said quietly. But the thing is, my company has a strict policy. We prioritize reliability and character. I got character. Stan protested, stepping closer. No, Stan, I said, opening the car door. You have policies. You have profit margins. But when the engine dies and the lights go out, you're the guy who locks the door, and I can't have my fleet serviced by a guy who wouldn't stop to help a dying woman because he was worried about a mayor's parade. I got in the car, started the engine, a quiet, powerful hum, and rolled down the window. I'm giving the contract to Mike's garage down the street. I heard he let a guy pay for a transmission fix with firewood last winter. That's the kind of partner we need. I drove away, watching Stan in the rearview mirror, standing alone in the rain, kicking the dirt, shouting at the clouds, small and bitter and shrinking with every mile I put between us. When I got home that night, Leo was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework on a new laptop, wearing braces that didn't hurt anymore, and he looked up and smiled. How was work, Dad? It was good, I said, loosening my tie. I fixed a problem. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. And I want to ask you guys this because it's not as simple as it sounds. I won. I got the job. I got the revenge. I got the happy ending. But if Eleanor Sterling hadn't been in that ambulance, if it had been a homeless guy or a drug addict or just a regular grandma with no money, I still would have lost my job. I still would have been fired. And nobody would have come to my driveway with a job offer. I would be destitute, right? Now that's so. Did I succeed because I did the right thing? Or did I succeed because I accidentally saved a rich person? It feels like in this country, doing the right thing is a luxury that only pays off if you get lucky. Stan was wrong, morally. But was he wrong about how the world works? He protected his business. I risked everything on a gamble. If that gamble hadn't paid off, Leo and I would be on the street. So tell me in the comments, is doing the right thing actually a bad survival strategy for the poor? Should we praise the result, or should we be terrified that kindness is so risky? I'm Caleb Miller, and I'm still trying to figure out if I'm a hero or just a lottery winner. Let me know what you think.